Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
For some of you that work here probably in December, I see some familiar faces here. As you may remember Corina back then, she talked to us about the best practices designing the Windows Phone applications. Tonight she will tell us and show us how to prototype the first phase of the Windows Phone apps. And Corina, take it from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm Corina Black. I spoke here. It was in December. Was it all the way back in December?
I just checked.
Oh, you just checked? Okay.
December
All right.
2011.
It was a while ago. I'm from the Windows Phone Design Studio, and Darlene Wong actually did a presentation the last month on the Metro Style design principles, so it might be some good background information for you guys. Today I'm going to talk about prototyping. Prototyping is excellent for Windows Phone applications. Excellent for user testing purposes and stakeholder feedback purposes to make sure that you're optimizing for the right solution for your users. You can get that feedback, do iterations quickly, so prototypes are really excellent. I am going to be prototyping in Silverlight using Expression Blend. Clearly it's going to be a Windows Phone prototype. So let me just start with a little bit of introductory information. I'm sure you guys all know Silverlight. It is clearly an application framework for writing and running Windows Phone applications. It's optimized for rich immersive experiences, rich graphics, rich animations and transitions, rich media. It is one of the 2 frameworks available for creating Windows Phone applications. There is also XNA, which is oftentimes used for games, not solely for game development purposes. And Silverlight applications are created in Visual Studio or Expression Blend. Correct me if I'm wrong. And both of them are great for creating application experiences, and you can do it from start to finish in either one. Expression Blend, in my opinion, is really optimized for the design experience, for creating that rich immersive, those rich immersive interfaces. Visual Studio is great for that as well. It does have some additional capabilities. It allows you to debug and do performance analysis and performance testing and optimization on your applications. So it has some really great functionality as well. Developers are very familiar with Visual Studio oftentimes, and it's optimized also for code editing. I'm going to do the prototype in Expression Blend. Expression Blend has all these great features that I've listed here. You'll see more here in a moment. Project templates, great design surface. XAML editing, I might show a little bit of code behind if I have time. There are also all the great SDK controls that you get by default, and you can use the toolkit controls as well, so you can have access to additional controls, to add that great experience to your applications and functionality. So let's just jump right into this and take a look at the prototype I'm going to build. Again, what I'm going to show you, I'm going to create a prototype, obviously. You can also create full working applications using the same process for the most part. So please keep that in mind. So this is the application that we're going to build. It is a weather application optimized for the phone form factor. On the first screen, you're going to see the 5-day weather forecast. It's going to use your current location. You'll have to imagine, because it is a prototype, to present the weather for your location. There are also alerts, weather alerts, near your current location. And imagine the capability of also being able to add additional locales where you might want to track weather. Let's say you're traveling a lot, you're going to Amsterdam or New York or LA, it might be nice to include weather details for those locations. In this prototype, I'm not going to cover that, but the experience could be a lot more expansive than what I'm going to show you. So with that, this is the target UI. Let's go ahead and build this experience. And I am going to try to touch on many of the design principles as I'm working. So I'll try to call attention to them as I'm working along, because you have to keep those in mind when you're building your prototypes and, of course, your real experiences, applications that you're going to deploy to the real world. So you'll see a little bit of that. And with that, let's just go straight to Expression Blend. So in Expression Blend, there are a variety of project templates. I'm sure, how many of you have used it? How many of you haven't used Expression Blend? Oh my gosh, there are some. All right, this will be good for you. So I think I'll have some tips for the rest of you as well, and some things you might learn. So, and if not, come up and teach me something afterwards. I'd love to learn from you all. But there are a lot of great project templates that are terrific starting points for your application development. I'm going to start with this Windows Phone application template, which is essentially empty. There is also a data-bound application template, this one here, which shows how to utilize sample data, and it'll also demonstrate how to do basic page navigation, so it's kind of a nice starting point, nice learning point for those purposes. 2 of the core application patterns in Windows Phone are Panorama and Pivot. There are 2 templates to get you started in those directions. Again, really useful. There is also this Windows Phone control library. Very useful if you want to create reusable controls in your applications. And then I have Sketchflow in here, but I'm not going to talk about that. That's actually a separate application. So with that, let's go ahead. I'm going to name my project. We're creating a weather application. I'm going to call it Weather Bag. I like that name. It is, again, I'm going to start with the most empty project template of all. It is the Windows Phone application template. I'm hitting Control-0 to zoom out. All right, so let me step back to the slide deck real quick. I want to talk a little bit about what we have here. So the application, that basic application pattern that we're seeing here is a panorama. Panorama is really optimized for those immersive experiences. Typically, you won't see an application bar. I'm just going to mention a few things here. It's optimized for portrait viewing, and very often you won't see the system tray on by default. Again, immersive experiences really draw the users in. So I'm going to keep that in mind as I get started in Expression Blend here. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to turn off the system tray and make sure that I'm viewing the application, or the application is going to view in portrait mode. And I'll talk a little bit about the tool windows that I'm using here. And the process that I use is I'm designing and building my applications. And I do it a variety of different ways, as you'll see here in a moment. So first thing I'm going to do, I use the Objects and Timeline tool window quite a bit. I also do XAML and Design Surface Split View quite a bit, because I work interchangeably between the two oftentimes. And the property window is also very essential and used very often in Expression Blend. So I have all those open. I'm going to search for system tray. I just type SYS in the search field, and I can turn the system tray off, as you see. The next thing I want to do is search for supported orientations. I type SU, and I get the property for supported orientations. It's already in portrait, so I'm good to go.
Can you talk about the implications of hiding and not hiding the system tray there?
The implications?
Yeah, so does that mean that if I turn it off and I take advantage of the full screen, is my app going to then be covered up by the system tray if the user brings it down?
It will. It'll drop down over the top of your application, yeah. And it's the title in the panorama that it would drop down over the top of, and it would be under the user's control. So, of course, they want that information, and it will go away after a period of time. So I'm thinking it's probably the right experience for users. And again, very often, if you look at our native applications, they don't display the system tray by default. Some do. The majority don't. Because of that, it's really optimized for that immersive experience. So I'm going to go to full screen view so you guys can see everything that I'm doing now. The next thing I want to do is I want to remove the contents of my layout root grid, because I'm going to drop a panorama control in there. That's going to be the base of my application. And one other thing I'm going to do is, in this particular template, there are 2 rows in the grid that you get with the template. So I'm going to remove those. I could do that in the property grid. I actually think it's easier to do that directly in XAML. So I'm going to do that and get rid of some of the comments. Again, as I mentioned, I kind of work interchangeably between the design surface and XAML view. So I'm going to go full XAML view again. So I have kind of the clean slate on which to build my application, and now I'm going to drop my panorama in here. So I'm going to go over to this asset library in the tool window, and I'm going to type panorama or pan, and it brings up the panorama control. I select it, and you see it here. I'm going to make sure my layout root grid is selected, double click to add it to the design surface, right click to auto size and fill the panorama in the available space. Now I'm going to name the panorama and get rid of the panorama item headers because I'm not going to use those in my application, if you recall from the PowerPoint slide deck. To do that, I am going to delete my search term and go over here, selected my panorama, and expand some of these fields so I can see the title. And I'm going to type weather bag, which is the name of my application, hit tab, and the name of my panorama has changed. I'm going to select each panorama item and delete the header for each and tab away, and as you can see, the header disappears exactly as I want. The next thing that I'm going to do when I'm working, and I would recommend this in Objects and Timeline tool window, which I oftentimes work with, I name things always so I know what I'm interacting with and working on. So I'm going to do that. I think it's good practice when you're using Expression Blend. So this first panorama item is my weather panorama item. The grid inside is my weather grid. The next panorama item is my alert, not alert. I can spell. The grid is alert grid. Let me just build real quick so we can see the current state of the application. Very basic right now, but headed in the right direction. So I have my panorama with the proper title, weather bag. It's totally empty. Now we're going to add content and style that content. So in Expression Blend, what I'm going to do now is pride and craftsmanship is one of the core Metro style design principles, and use of our grids. Windows 8 has a specific grid that they use. Windows Phone also has a specific grid. I'm going to bring in that grid that we've used to design our native applications into Expression Blend, and it's going to help me align my content, group it logically, add appropriate negative space or white space, and really make my interface elements look nice and aligned and beautiful. That pride and craftsmanship. So I right-click on my project. I'm going to add an existing item. I have it in my assets folder here. It is a PNG. It's in my project. I'm going to quickly lock my panorama in my Objects and Timeline tool window so I don't accidentally move anything. One of the nice features of Blend, and simply select my layout root, double-click on that grid. I'm going to do it twice to make it a little bit brighter so you can hopefully see it. And now I have the grid that's going to help me align things in my interface. So next, I need the data that I can design around. So I'm going to add sample data. I'm going to show you a method for doing that. In Expression Blend, there is this data tab, really, really powerful for adding sample data. If you click on this tab, there are a variety of ways that you can add sample data. You can add it from a class. It can use that class definition to stub out your sample data set for you. You can do it with XML, or you can do it with this new sample data set or new sample data command, which is what I'm going to do. Very straightforward and simple, as you'll see here in a moment. I'm going to create two data sets. I could create one for weather and one for alerts. I just like the distinction between the two. The first one I'm going to call weather data. I want it available for the project and at runtime. And I'm going to add one more for my alert data. Alert data. And let's go ahead and start customizing the collection items, starting with weather. For weather, I want my weather description, the day of the week, and the high and the low temperature. The first two, the title, or the weather description and the day of the week, are strings. The next two, the high and the low temperature, are numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and specify those here in this data tab. I can add additional data set items by clicking on the little plus that you see here. So I'm going to add 2 more. I'm going to name them first. First one is going to be the weather description. I'm going to call it description. The next one is day. The next one, high temperature, I'll just call it high. The next one, low temperature, call it low. Again, the high and the low temperature are numbers. And I'm going to go ahead and go with length 2. I could do 3 if I wanted. I'm just going to stick with 2. It's easier. I'll do the same with the low temperature, make it a number of length 2. For my day, I want it to be a string of length 1, and 8 for the word length is appropriate, will work. String for the description, I want it to also be of length 1. Max word length of 8 is fine. Now for my alert data, I want 2 items in there. I want the alert title and the alert description. Both of them are strings, so since I have 2 items in this collection by default, I'm just going to go ahead and rename them and make sure that they're both strings of the proper length. And I click twice, and the first one is, I'm going to call it title. And it is a string, and I want it to be a string of length 2. The next one is description, and this is also a string. And I'm going to go with length of 100 and max word length of 12. And Blend's going to generate ipsum delorum Greeking text for me, so it's super powerful. I don't have to do anything, and it's other than set up the data set description here that you're seeing. So my data set's set up, and I'm going to add it to the design surface so that I can start designing around it. And to do that, let's start with our weather collection. I'm going to select the collection item and drag, oh, I have to unlock my panorama, otherwise I couldn't add anything to it. Drag and drop the collection onto this weather grid. And then I'm going to right click on it in the design surface. I could also do that in the Objects and Timeline tool window and say auto size to fill. Next, I'm going to select my alert data collection, drag and drop it onto the alert grid. And again, right click on it, auto size to fill. Let's see, zoom in just a little bit so we can see a little bit more. So, one last thing I want to do real quickly. Again, I like to name things consistently. I do that all the time. So I'm going to quickly call this list box that was automatically generated weather LB for weather list box. The next list box that was generated from my alerts information, alerts LB. Okay, so I have it set up. So I have all the data set up. I could go with it as is. One last thing that I want to do is actually want to customize the data and make it a little bit more realistic so that I can design around it and get a better feel for how my application is going to look. And I can do that. So let's start with the weather data. In the data tab, I'm going to click on this little tub next to the collection, and it brings up an editor. I want, as I mentioned, the 5-day weather forecast in this particular prototype. So I'm going to set the number of records to 5. I'm going to put realistic day data in here, starting with Monday, hit return, Tuesday, hit return, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. For the description, I'm going to be optimistic, and I'm not going to spell sunny wrong. I'm going to do it one more time. And it's going to be sunny. Let's all hope for sun. Geez, I can spell. There we go. Let's go with cloudy. Ah! All right. And sunny, and how about, let's just be realistic, and we'll just do this last one, rainy. I'll go ahead and leave the high and low temperatures as they are. I think that's fine. I just wanted to see realistic descriptions and realistic days of the week. Actually, I take that back. I'm going to make all the low temperatures 32 so I can quickly identify the low temperatures. And I'm just typing in the numbers, hitting return, and it's filling in the information. Okay, so now if we take a look at my weather data set, it is a little bit more realistic. Sunny weather, it's Monday, I have high and low temperature. I'm going to do very quickly the same for my alert data. I'm going to leave the description, which is 100 words, as is. Blend is automatically generating that Greeking text for me. I am going to change the number of records and the titles. I'm going to, let's say high humidity. I think I'm thinking too much here. How about high winds? And I will just copy that and paste that into each of these. All right, that's not working. High winds, high winds. There we go. All right, so I have somewhat realistic sample data in here now. And if we look at the alerts information, we have our high humidity, high winds, high winds, high winds. So I'm satisfied with where I am. I think I can design around it now. So let's start with our 5-day weather forecast. I would run it, but I think let me do a little bit of designing here and it'll look a little bit better. And it will only be about another 10 minutes. So I'm going to go to the Properties tab, bring that into focus, and I'm going to start with this weather data again. The weather list box that was automatically generated is where I'm going to, what I'm going to go into, and I'm going to access the item template for the items in this list box, and I'm going to customize the style for that item template. Blend allows you to customize the appearance of all controls. You can edit the templates for them. I could edit, as you see here, when I right-click on this list box. The list box template, this isn't what I want to do. It would give me access to the frame of that list box, the background of that list box, the scroll controls of that list box. I could thoroughly customize it. There's no need to. Again, what I want to get into is this item template. That is the style for the items that are displayed in that list box. So I'm going to edit the generated item template when I drop the sample data set onto my design surface. And again, I work interchangeably between XAML View and the design surface for various reasons, as you'll see here in a moment. This is the item template that was generated for me. As you can see, it's a bunch of text blocks, and I don't know what I'm working on. So again, the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to use the binding information here, is I'm going to copy from XAML into my Objects in Timeline tool window, so I know what I'm working on. I'm just simply copying and pasting in place in the Objects in Timeline tool window, and I'll do it for each of them. So now I have descriptive information there, and I know what I'm working with. The next thing I want to do, actually I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so I can see more, there we go, of the information that I'm going to design. Move that up a little bit. So I want description to come first, and I can drag and drop in the Objects in Timeline tool window to move things up and down in the hierarchy. I also want the low temperature to come before the high temperature. So I'll just set that basic structure up, as you just saw. The next thing I want to do is there are system resources that I can bind to for colors, which is really great in the case of colors, for instance. If I bind to the system resources for colors across the board in the proper way, my application will seamlessly respond to the user's theme preferences or theme settings. So it can provide a good experience for users. So I'm going to do that. And here are the color resources. I've selected all the items in the Objects in Timeline tool window. I'm going to bind to the phone foreground color. It's white. And I'm also going to change their system resources for fonts, font sizes, font faces, margins. You'll see that here in a moment. So I'm going to leverage those as well. So for the font size, I'm going to go with phone font size normal. The next thing I'm going to do is, actually I'm going to set the font face as well. By clicking on this little square that you see here, it's giving me access to this context menu, and I can get in there and I can utilize those resources in the system resources menu item. I'm going to use semi-light. Next thing I'm going to do is I want to make the description, the weather description, a little bit bigger, and I want to use the accent color for that weather description. So I've selected it here, and I'm going to go to the color resources and select the phone accent color. The next thing that I want to do is I want to make it much bigger. So I'm going to play with the system resources here. Extra, extra large, not as big as I want, 54 point as you can see here. I'm going to try the system resource for phone font size huge. That's way too huge. I want something a little smaller. So I'm going to convert back to a local value, and I'm going to use 84. 84. Try that again. There we go. 84. That's the size that I want. So the next thing that I'm going to do is, as you saw from the PowerPoint, I want the high and the low temperature to orient horizontally right below the day of the week. So I'm going to set that up. So I'm going to do some grouping and alignment of elements that you'll see here in a moment. I do that once on the item template, and it applies across all of the items that are rendered in that list box. So it's pretty powerful. And it may take a little bit of fiddling, but the grid really helps me align things properly. As you'll see, I'll reference that a lot here in a moment. So I'm going to start with my high and my low temperature. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say group into a stack panel. I'm going to make sure that stack panel's auto sizing for width and the height. And I'm also going to set the orientation to horizontal. The next thing that I'm going to do is grab the day of the week and the stack panel that I just created. And I'm also going to group those into another stack panel. Make sure that they're auto sizing both, again, in the height and the width. And vertical orientation for those two items is fine. So I'm going to expand that. I'm going to select my day of the week, and I'm going to make the font a little bit bigger. I'm going to set it to phone font size large. So it's a little bit bigger. I'm going to grab this stack panel for my high and my low temperature. I'm going to move it up a little bit, closer to the day of the week. And now I'm going to style, I'm going to add a slash in between the high and the low temperature and degree symbols for both of those items as well. And I find it easiest to work in XAML for this. The name is that slash symbol, and add my slash. I'm going to control click and drag. I didn't mention that before, to duplicate that slash symbol. And I'm going to use that for my degree symbol. I'll call it deg1. And I'm going to use a lowercase o for the degree symbol. I could use the real degree symbol. I don't know the keys for that, so this works just as easily. I want to make the size a little bit smaller, convert to a local value, and I'm going to set the size to 8. And as you can see, it's looking like a degree symbol. I'm going to control click and drag in the Objects and Timeline tool window and duplicate it so that we have the degree symbol by the high temperature now. So the next thing I'm going to do, I don't know if you noticed, but I had a vertical line beside the day of the week and the high and the low temperature. I'm going to add that and also position it a little bit more precisely on this grid. Let me zoom out a little. There we go. So let's go ahead and collapse that. I'm going to select the day of the week and the stack panel with the high and the low temperature, and I'm going to group into another stack panel. Again, I want it to auto size, height and width, vertical, actually I want horizontal orientation. And did I do something? Let's try that again. Okay. One more thing, my negative margin on my high and low temperature disappeared, so I'm going to add that back. So, do I have 2 stack panels here? That's all right. So what I'm going to do to create that line, there are various ways that I can do it. I'm going to use a border, and I'm just going to stroke one side of that border, the left side. Again, there are various ways to do this. I find this to be a perfectly fine way to do it. I'm going to drag it up in the hierarchy. Select my stack panel because I want the orientation to be horizontal. And I'm going to set the width to 2 and the height to 40. And for the appearance, again, I only want the left part of the border to be stroked. So I'm going to set the stroke width everywhere else to 0. And for the border brush, I'm going to bind to the system color resource for foreground. I'm also going to add a little bit of space between that line and the text information. Let's do it this way. I'll do it on the stack panel. There we go. So one last thing, a little bit more tweaking here. I am going to move this stack panel up slightly. Give it a negative margin with my day of the week and the high and the low temperature. So it aligns much nicer to that line you'll see here in a moment when I move it over. Now I'm going to position it a little bit further to the right. And to do that, I'm going to select that stack panel, set horizontal alignment to left, and then I'm going to set the left margin to 235. So it's positioned where I want. Again, I'm going to make these edits to this item template one time, and it's going to apply across all items in that list box. So this effort that I'm putting in is going to be worth it. I'm going to get a really nice effect. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually set the height of the weather description text box. I want it to be 135. It's clipping the descender elements, as you can see here, slightly, but I like that effect, so I'm going to go with it. And one last set of things. As you can see, this text isn't aligning nicely to the grid here, so I'm going to have it align nicely on the left and the right. I'm going to set a left and a right margin of 6 on this stack panel, and things move over and are aligning better to the grid. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set a negative 40 for the top margin. And I had these numbers, I actually played with these numbers a little bit previously so I could move a little faster. You'd have to play with a little bit more. It's not magic. So I did play with it a little bit, and so I set that negative 40 margin on the item template, and then I also moved the list box up slightly, and as you can see, the baseline of each weather description is aligning nicely to the grid. That's exactly what I want. Actually, I'm going to go into the item template, you'll see here in a moment, and I'll fix these items because these aren't doing exactly what I want. I want every item to align nicely to that grid on the baseline of the description text. So I'll select my weather list box one more time. When you go into an item template, you get these breadcrumbs, so I can step in and out of the item template using these breadcrumbs. So I'll just step back into it using the breadcrumb because it's pretty easy. And select my stack panel, and I'm going to try negative 36. Works perfect. So I have the alignment the exact way that I want it, aligning nicely to the grid. And so now I'm going to do the same thing to my alert information, but I'm not going to walk you through this process. I'm actually going to use a resource dictionary where I've already done this process, and I'm just going to apply that the template for the list box from that resource dictionary, as you'll see here in a moment. One thing though, I'm going to use the toolkits wrap panel for the item template in the list box, or the items panel rather in the list box. That describes how the information is stacked in that list box. By default, it's stacked vertically using a stack panel. Again, I want to use the wrap panel because I want 2 columns of information. And to do that, I need to add a reference to the toolkit. I've already installed the toolkit. I'm going to right click on my project and my references and select Add Reference. Go to Program Files, Microsoft SDKs, Windows Phone, and go into the toolkit and select the toolkit. And if I rebuild real quickly, I can now use the wrap panel. So I'm going to I'm still in my item template. I'm going to step out of it using that breadcrumb. And I'm going to go to my alerts grid. And I'm going to right click on the alerts grid and again go into this Edit Additional Templates menu item. This time I'm going to select my items panel, create empty. And the defaults here, actually I'm going to select application. That's fine. And I'm going to go into this asset library and type WR so I can access wrap panel. There it is. Select it. Delete my stack panel. Double click to add my wrap panel. We don't see anything happening yet, but you will when I apply the resource, the template from the resource dictionary for that list box. So I'll step out of the items panel template. And the next thing that I want to do is add my resource dictionary. It's an existing item in my assets folder, and it is this resource dictionary here. Let me just build real quickly. And again, I'm going to right-click on that alerts list box, edit additional templates, select my item template, and I'm going to apply a resource. I want this alerts item template. And as soon as I did that, it applied the style that I created previously. And it's perfectly aligned to the grid. I went through that process you just saw a moment ago for these items, the finessing to get it to align perfectly to the grid. That pride and craftsmanship really will shine through. Let me get rid of the grid so you can take a look. I'm not going to need it anymore, so I'll just go ahead and delete these items and run the application briefly here. And things are aligning nicely. It's looking really balanced, and there's nice use of negative space. It's looking really good. It's also, as I mentioned, I'm leveraging the system color resource, the accent color for my weather description, and you're seeing that color light up in the weather description information. So it's kind of fun. Okay, so now, does anybody have any questions before I move on? Yes.
So basically, because you use two different mechanisms to do this. One, you actually went through step by step and created the entire items template.
Yeah.
The other one you applied a dictionary. So I'm assuming in the XAML, those look differently, right? That one, you've got a whole lot of XAML in one place, and the other one, you've just got a reference out to your dictionary. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, so the resource dictionary that I added has all that that load of XAML. I have page transition styles there. Here's my weather item template, which I actually have a copy of in here. This is not the one that I actually created that one by scratch, or from scratch. The, where is it? The alerts item template, oh look, it's very simple. It's right there, very simple. It's actually not a lot of XAML. But the XAML for the item template is up here in the resources part of mainpage.xaml.
Okay.
So it's a combination. Yeah, I've done.
At some point, you would then say, okay, that's a lot of code in one, or a lot of XAML in one place, and so you would just want to package that up and
I would, yeah.
pull that off into another dictionary.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it streamlines things a little bit. So yeah, that's exactly what I would recommend. Okay. Yes.
More questions. Are there any benefits of using the system resources for font styles? Or it's more like a preference?
I actually think I know there is a benefit to using them. We know, like for instance, the smallest size is actually usable and readable on the phone form factor because we've done that testing. The other sizes actually map to many of the styles that you see in our native applications, so you can replicate our native applications probably a lot faster by using those system resources for font faces, font sizes, etc. And then we also have, like I mentioned, resources for margins, and there are other items as well. So it actually is really beneficial. So yes.
Just wondering, is it really easy to put things on the live tile from here?
Is it really easy to what?
Put things on the live tile?
So live tile, no, you actually have to do that programmatically from what I understand. So I will, if I have time, I'll show you how you can do that. One method, the super simple method. So I'll try to show you, but you can't do that in Blend. I can do it in code in Blend, as you'll see possibly in a moment. Okay, a few moments. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a page. So I'm showing, as you can see here, I'm showing little snippets of my alerts information. It's very likely that you're going to want to read the full alerts details, so I'm going to add a page to display the full alerts details. I'm also going to add an application bar. I think it might be useful in many cases to share this alerts information maybe with others. Maybe you're going on some family vacation and you're traveling along and you notice some issue in the weather, or you look at your application and you notice some issue that may interfere with your travels. You might want to share it with your family members. There are other reasons that you might want to do it as well. So it could be a useful action to perform in this interface, and the application bar is the appropriate location for that. So I'll show you how to do that real quickly. I'm not going to hook it all up, but so that's the next set of steps that I'm going to do. So I'm going to add a new page. I'm going to right-click on my project, and I'm going to add a new item. Windows Phone page. I'm going to call it Alert Details. And Control-0 to zoom out. I'm going to make this consistent with the other one. I'm going to turn the system tray off by default. And I'm going to leave all the basic information that I have here in place. It's a good starting point. It's a very simple UI here. I'm going to Control, click, and drag this text block at the top here. I'm going to utilize that to create my weather description information. And I know from experience that text wrapping is off, so I'm going to set wrapping to on in the property window. And delete my search term, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and I'm going to do data binding now. I'm going to bind the text to the sample data that I created. I want to bind it to my alert information, the description. So I'm going to say OK. The next thing I'm going to do, I mentioned these margins that are also available using the system resources. If I click on the little square again, I can get to the system resources. I'm going to use phone margin. And it nicely adds the appropriate padding so things seamlessly align, which is kind of cool. And then I'm going to select my page name, and I want that to bind to the alert title. So data binding again, and I'm going to select title. And the last thing I want to do is I'm just going to double click on the title of this page, make it all caps, and I'm going to title it Alert Details. That's static and doesn't need to update based on what I select. So, all right, so I have my page created. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add the navigation to that page from that alert list box, and I'm going to use behaviors to do that. So I'm going to go back to my main page.xaml, select my alert list box. I'm going to go into this asset tab. I know you can't see it very well, but that is in fact the asset tab. And I'm going to select behaviors. I could also go down to this asset library down here and have the same information. I work kind of interchangeably between that asset library flyout and this asset tab. So I'm selecting my behavior node, and I'm going to go down to Blend has a behavior for navigate to page. I'm going to select that and drag and drop it onto my alert list box. I could use this to navigate to that page that I just created. I would have to go through a process of updating the data appropriately based on my selection in that page. So I created a behavior. You can do that too. And it will do all that for me. So I'm going to delete the one from Blend, and I'm going to load my behavior real quickly by right-clicking and adding existing item from my assets. It's this page navigation, quickly build, so I can use it. Go back to my assets, behaviors, and here's my behavior. Just drag and drop it into the alerts list box, and I'm going to select my page, which is this alert, alert details, and I'm going to go ahead and build so that we can see it's actually working. It's kind of nice to see at every step that things are working. So if I move over, click on one of these, I see high winds. Let's go back. Here's high humidity, high humidity. So everything's all hooked up, and it was pretty seamless using my behavior. So if you're working with designers, you could create behaviors for them and allow them to rapidly prototype. It could be useful, obviously, in prototyping situations of various sorts to set something, to utilize behaviors for, encapsulated functionality that you might want to reuse. So I thought that would be really useful to discuss. So the next thing, let's add the application bar. So in Blend, it's actually really easy to do. I can search after selecting phone application page for app or APP or type AP, and I get the application bar property. When I click new, you'll see it reserves space down at the bottom of the page for the application bar. I can add menu items. There's a menu items collection. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to add a button for sharing, and my buttons are here. I'm going to click on the ellipsis and choose add another item, the application bar button. And there are a set of icons that I can choose from. I can also load an icon that I've created myself if it was more appropriate. It just so happens that there is a share icon in here, so I'm going to use the share icon, and I'm going to type share for the command in lowercase and say OK, and my button is in place. Of course, I'd have to hook it up with code. I haven't done that, but it is very useful. This is where the page commands go. If the actual page elements themselves aren't interactive, most elements on the screen are deemed interactive, you know, in interfaces like the phone or slates. There are cases where you need additional commands, and the app bar is where those additional commands would go. Yes?
Are those icons both light and dark themes?
They'll react automatically for you, the ones that you get in by using Expression Blend. Yeah.
Are there any built-in buttons just for like sending an email? So you know there would be a mailing app already, so you could just use it without having to code the whole behavior for the
Is there like encapsulated code for that? Is that what you're asking for emailing items?
Windows Phone, you would assume there's a mailing app, so
Not that I'm
have a mail button and it will work.
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of anything that you could simply drop on the design surface that has encapsulated code behind that would do that for you, although that would definitely be nice, but nothing that I'm aware of. So, okay, so now the next thing that I'm going to do, I just want to mention real quickly, by following the model, like the UI model that you see in our native applications, it's part of this win as one principle. It's really good for users. They don't have to relearn how to interact with the interface. They learn from one application. They can take those learnings to another application. This application bar is, again, where the commands go very often if the elements on the screen aren't interactive by default for users. So just want to quickly mention that. So now I'm going to add animations and transitions. These are available in the toolkit. And you can leverage them, obviously, as well. They're available in the toolkit. And it's really part of this alive and in motion principle, and adds that life, that immersive quality to your experiences. Animations do that, as well as really can guide the user and help them understand how to interact with your applications, as you'll see here in a moment. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to add page transitions first. And to do that, I need a reference to the toolkit on all of my pages, so I'm going to do that real quickly. And I would need to do that at the top here by adding, the namespace. I know a quick little trick to add the namespace automatically. That is to go into your page, drop something from the toolkit onto the design surface, and delete it, and it generates the namespace for me. I don't want to type it. So I'm going to do that for all the pages here real quickly. Okay, so it's set up. For page transitions, I need to go into app.xaml.cs and use the transition frame included in as part of the toolkit, not the phone application frame that comes by default with our project templates. So I'm going to do that real quickly. I'm going to go into app.xaml.cs and go down to my frame, which is somewhere. There it is. And I'm going to change this to transition frame, save it, and go ahead and close that. I'm going to close my resource dictionary. Let's just close some items so that I'm not distracted. So the next thing I want to do is I need to add XAML for those transitions into my page. I created a resource for that. The XAML details are available on CodePlex, when you download the toolkit. Again, I've created, I've added the XAML to my resource dictionary, and the really cool thing about that is I can just simply right-click on my phone application page and edit the template, apply resource, and I'm going to use the turnstile page style transition. That's what I named it. That's my name, not the name anybody else came up with. So I'll do that for both pages. Edit template, apply resource, that turnstile, page transition. One more thing that I want to do. In my alert list box, not everything on the interface is clickable. You're not going to click on the weather details on the first panorama item page and navigate anywhere. So to help users learn how this interface works, I'm going to add an effect when they press on something that it tilts. You'll see that in our native applications, and it will hint to users that they're going to navigate to another page. So I'm going to add that, and that effect is in the toolkit as well. To add it, I need to go into XAML. It's very simple. I'm going to type toolkit and tilt effect, and is tilt enabled, and I'm going to set it to true, and then I'm going to hit F5 and build, and we'll see that I have everything in place. So I have my tilt effect, and if I actually click on it and let go or press on it, I navigate to the page. You see the nice turnstile effect. When I click the back button, you see that transition again. It really is immersive, it's engaging, it's also helping users understand how to interact with the interface and making it fun. So, so any questions? The next thing that I'm going to do is what am I going to do? I'm going to add, how much time do I have left? Do I need to be done now? Okay. I'm going to add an opening animation, and I'm going to customize the splash screen. But before I do that, does anybody have any questions? Okay. Okay.
Can you customize the panorama title?
You can.
Okay.
You can do that. The way that I do it is I'm not going to actually do it because I like it the way that it is I would go in here and delete this title. And I'll undo it, but I'll do it real quick. Controls.
Oh, I see you added a replacement set of controls.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, go back. What's going on? Let me just delete and add that back. My computer is not very happy with me for some reason. Yes?
What would be the good search term for somebody to find the grid that you use?
You can actually find it on Arturo Toledo's blog. It's UX. I think it's ux.r2.tv. Yeah, and we'll make it available as well. But if you want it now, that's where you can find it. So actually, I'm going to call it weather bag. So, and I use keyboard shortcuts all the time. So you see things changing. It's because I'm using keyboard shortcuts, Control-0 to zoom out, Control+ and minus to zoom in and out. And okay, so now I'm going to add an opening splash animation, and I'm going to customize the splash screen. Right now, it is the default that you get with the project template. It is for the splash screen, that little clock. It's really not appropriate for your application, third-party applications. You're going to want to customize it. I'm going to show you a really simple way to do that. But let's start with our animation. So I'm going to lock my panorama so I don't mess with it. The next thing I'm going to do is go into my asset library, and I want the pop-up. I'm going to select pop-up. I'm going to double-click to add it to the layout route. I'm going to right-click here, and I'm going to auto-size to fill for both the pop-up and the grid inside that pop-up. Auto-size fill. I'm going to delete the search term. I'm going to set the grid's fill color to the phone background color resource. Then I'm going to add 2 text blocks. Just double-click to add 2 text blocks, and I want them to stack rather than sit right on top of each other. So I'm going to wrap them in a stack panel. By default, it's vertical. The next thing I'm going to do is customize the style for each of these text blocks. Let's bring up common properties. I want the first text block to be all uppercase, weather, tab. I want the font face. Actually, I'll just leave it as is. I want the font size to be huge, literally. Yeah, let me auto-size that because clearly I have a problem. And another issue, a lot of these items that you drop on the design surface, they might wrap, like your text blocks, not items, text blocks. I don't want them to wrap in this case, so I'm going to set it to no wrap. And so I have kind of the effect that I want. Delete my search term and select my next text block. I'm going to call it bag. That's the name of my app. And I'm going to set the font size to extra, extra large. Now I want to reposition elements. in preparation for creating my animation. I'm hitting the V key to bring up the arrow cursor, and I'm going to try to reposition. But I have things in a stack panel, and so they're trying to align in a certain way using margins and padding, and it's really difficult to position them for my purposes right now using a stack panel or even a grid. So what I want to use is a canvas, which will allow me to position things freeform. So I'm going to right click on my stack panel, and I'm going to change the layout type to a canvas. And once I do that, I can position elements freely wherever I want. So I'm going to select these items and kind of position them like that. Let's go back to our pop-up. So that's kind of how I want it to look at the beginning of my animation. So now I'm going to create my animation in the Objects and Timeline tool window. If I click the plus, I can create an animation. I'm going to call it open, and let's give myself a little bit more room to work with. There we go. I'm going to go out to 1 second. This is a bit far, but I'll do that. I'm going to add some keyframes using this little keyframe thing here. I've selected both of my text blocks. I'm going to go to 1.5 seconds, add another set of keyframes, and then I'm going to move the text to where I want them to be at the end of the animation at these ending set of keyframes, because that's what it's going to look like at the end of the animation, and then it will interpolate in the middle for me. So I'll select this first text block. I'm hitting the V key so I can move the text block. Oops. Shoot. Bear with me a moment. Let me go back to my pop-up, open my animation, select my text block again, and whoops, I want the ending keyframe. And let me just position it, like I said, where I want it to be at the end of the animation. Same for the bottom text block, where it's bag. The next thing that I want to do is I want the background of the grid to kind of fade out a little bit. So I'm going to select my grid, and I'm going to add a keyframe close to the end of the text animation, move out a little bit past the end, and create another keyframe. And at that point in time, I'm going to set the opacity of that background color to 0. I need to do one thing that I forgot to do. I need to set pop-up. Pop-ups by default aren't open, so I need to go back to that control, and I'm going to search for is, and I want to set it open by default because I want the animation to happen as soon as this page is loaded. Then I'm going to go back into my animation, and I'm going to select my pop-up, and at the very end of the animation, I'm going to set is open to false. So it's going to close the pop-up. I won't see it again, that opening animation, as I'm navigating around, which is exactly what I want. So I've created my animation. Let me just run it so we can take a look at it. I want to do one more thing. You notice, it animated kind of the way that I wanted. There are these easing effects that I can leverage to make the animations a little bit more lively, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that for my text elements. So I'm going to select both text blocks and get rid of my search criteria here. Go to the ending keyframe for both. Actually, I'm going to select the keyframes, and I'm going to choose one of these easing functions. I want it to kind of start out slow and animate quicker towards the end of the animation. So I'm going to select this particular easing effect. There are a variety that you can choose from. This one's most appropriate, and let's check out our animation one more time. So it's a little slow and then snappy. It's kind of a little bit more lively, the effect that I want. So now let's hook up the animation. I'll click the little X to get out of the animation area of Blend, and I'm going to select my pop-up. I'm going to use one of those behaviors again in the asset library, and there's one for control storyboard action. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to double click it, add it to the pop-up. I'm going to have it play my animation, open on loaded, and when I hit F5, we'll see my animation. So it's getting there. I want to fix that splash screen. I want it to look like the opening part of that animation so it feels a little bit more seamless. And to do that, very easy using our emulator and the tools, the other tools. I'm going to, first of all, let's just turn this animation off. It's not going to run unloaded so that we'll see it. And I'm not going to do mouse, actually mouse enter is bad. Let's do pop-up closed. It's not going to close because the animation hasn't run. I'm going to run the project again in the emulator, and I'm just going to see that opening screen once the animation loads or the page loads. And what I want to do is I want to take a screenshot, and using the emulator I can do that. So I can go to the screenshot screen, and you get a little notification down here because I don't have my emulator running at 100%. When it's taking my screenshot, I want it to run at 100%. So I'm going to go back to the emulator and click on the magnifying glass and set it at 100%. Go back to the screenshot tab here and click capture and save. It's saving it as a PNG. I need a JPEG, so I'm just going to save it as 1 on my desktop. And I'll go ahead and close this dialog and put the emulator size back down to 75% so I can see it. And I'm going to use MS Paint to change that PNG to a JPEG. So open on my desktop, my file called 1. And I'll just save as a JPEG into the folder for my project, if I can find it. Let's see. Which one? Is there one called weather? Oh, it's W. Weather bag. There we go. I'm just going to copy over the top of my splash screen image that I get in the project template. And when I do that, go ahead and replace. Yes. Close MS Paint. Go back to Blend, hit F5. It'll feel a little bit more seamless. Now this is my splash screen, and when my application loads, I don't see my animation because I haven't turned it on. I need it to run on loaded, so let's change it to run on loaded and hit F5 again. And ta-da! So I have kind of this, seamless opening experience. You'll want to play with like your opening splash screens and opening animations if you choose to do that a little bit more. This is just one simple method. It might be a nice starting point to learn from. So I have yes, questions before I move on. Yes.
Sorry, so is there any chance that phones might have a different form factor or resolution so that your splash screen actually might just look a little bit stretched or different, and then when it actually transitions into the controls?
Not in Nago, no. You're not going to encounter that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
All the phones right now are 800 by 480 resolution.
Yep.
All of them?
Yes.
They're all 480 by 800.
Did I say it wrong?
I said it. I was just making sure as I was saying it that I was saying it right. Yeah. So, and the slowness.
Is that part of the spec actually that phones should be
That's correct,
same
yeah.
size? Okay.
Yeah, that is. So any more questions? I have a couple of options. I could show you how to really quickly create a live tile, or I could show you how to create my method, my shortcut method of creating application icons and start page icons. Which are you guys more interested in? Start page or start page? Tile? Okay, tile. All right. Okay, maybe I can do both. Jam it in really, really fast. So I'm going to do the quick and dirty way of making a live tile. As you'll see here in a moment, and I'll talk about the other options as well. And you'll have to do a little bit more research into that, but there are plenty of resources on the web. So let me go into the code behind for madepage.xaml. And I'm going to add a namespace. I think it's using, in Microsoft. In Visual Studio, it's actually a little bit easier, in my opinion, to do code editing. So I may be a little bit slow here, and I apologize. But Microsoft.phone. I think it's system. No, shell. Shell And let's just add a loaded, not language, dot. This is definitely not the way you would code it, but you can probably imagine from the example that I'm going to show you here. So I've added a loaded event handler, and in here I'm going to update the tile and make it live, as live as I can quickly. So I'm going to do shell tile t equals, sorry, I have my cheat notes here. Shell tile dot active tiles dot first if t, which I shouldn't call t, should I? But I'm gonna, equals null. Return, and then I'm going to do shell, I think it's shell tile data. Shell tile data, yes, shell tile data. Okay, I'm not going to, data equals new, not that. See, I'm struggling a little bit here, sorry. Data, is that what I want? Yes. And then I'm going to do stdata dot, is it title that I want? Looking at my cheat notes here. Actually, I want, so that is shell tile data. Actually, I'm sorry, stdata dot back. Why can't I get back? I may have to actually, see, I'm really struggling because I really need IntelliSense and it's not, I'm doing something wrong here. Just give me one moment. What's that? I have shell here.
It does recognize the instance, but
yeah.
You need to pass T into the shell tile data constructor.
Maybe it's the name here.
Which namespaces?
I thought it was in. I thought it was in. I thought it was in shell. It's a very good question. I thought it was in shell, but this isn't lighting up. Shell tile, Microsoft shell tile.
Are you looking for standard tile data instead of
Yes, you are. You totally, thank you. Is it starter tile dot? Oh my goodness. Sorry. I may have to I may have to give up here.
tile data?
Say that one more time.
Standard.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Standard tile. Oh, thank you. Standard, got it. I'm with you now. Standard tile data, thank you. This guy. Okay, this is gonna work. Okay, that's it, I'm good. So now I can set the back content as well as the back title, which is what I want to do for my simple example that isn't looking so simple. I'm going to set the title to, I'm going to set it to, we're in Seattle, so it's going to be Seattle. And then for data dot back content equals, I'm going to say weather is 79 and sunny. And then, I'm being positive, come on. And then TT dot update equals, I want to fill it with my ST data. Okay, so this will work.
Starter tile. Like you have the word starter.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. Go away. Go away. Thank you.
Like TT, where do you define it? Right next to there? To the right. That one. Yeah.
Thank you. Do I want shell tile? I want shell tile. Yes, yes. Now it'll work. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so let it load. I'm gonna go ahead and go to my start page. And what I'm gonna do as a user, because this is the best application in the world, is I'm gonna pin it to my start page. And as you'll see in a moment, you know, let's say that I pick up my phone and I'm glancing at the tiles, and instantly I can see my weather, which is really nice because I want to know what it's going to be like this morning. I just woke up. If I wanted to see the 5-day weather forecast, I could do that as well. And as we were discussing, this application would make sense to potentially show weather for various locations that you might be traveling to. So if I wanted to go into the app, I could see that. But if I instantly wanted to know what the weather was like, I get that information on these live tiles. So it's really powerful. Definitely, you're going to want to take advantage of it. You're not going to necessarily want to do it like I just did here. This is one way you could do it. There are background agents that you could leverage to have the tile information for your application update in the background. And I'm sure we can provide some resources to learn more about that. So with that, we created our prototype. Many of the steps that you just saw me go through could also be used to create a real application that you would deploy to the marketplace. I did discuss some of the things that you're going to want to consider to take advantage of our Metro style design principles. Use the grid, pay attention. I actually didn't call this out, but I was making fonts various sizes in the interface to draw attention to the important information, adding that hierarchy. I added animations and transitions to make it more live and dynamic and immersive. The live tile does the same. I mentioned that it's important to utilize many of the application patterns that you see in our native applications. The principle of win as one is really about that, to help users not have to relearn how to use your application. So with that, does anybody have any questions in the last 6 minutes? Okay. Thank you. Okay.
And that is, this is great for English-speaking markets. The store goes to multiple markets.
Right.
How do you do the design for multiple languages?
That is an excellent question, and I haven't done it myself, but I know the question was, how do you design for different locales? And Ben, maybe you can help me. You probably have more information. You could store all of the strings.
I know how to get the localized resources. More along when you're designing, how do you think about it for multiple languages, given the different sizes and just how it's going to feel for those? I mean, what considerations would a person have to take?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. In this particular example, you're probably going to pay more attention to the size. I made for instance, the weather description information quite large. That may not work as nicely. It's going to get cut off in German, for instance, so I might want to make it a little bit smaller, knowing that let's say I was also targeting Germany. In the case of when we were looking at the alerts information, even on the opening panorama, it was fine. It was getting cut off anyway. And then you go into that page to view the details. And in the details, we could add a scroll viewer, so users, as the language gets longer, I think it's roughly like 30–40% longer, kind of in general, we would add a scroll viewer so users could get to all of that information. Those are some of the considerations I might make in this particular example. And of course, if that were something that I was concerned with, in this prototype I wasn't, I would obviously think more deeply depending on my particular scenarios. So yeah. Yes?
How easy it is to play with the data source you created and say I wanted to put that into the live tile, or in terms of getting it into the code and in the .cs file.
So I could refer. So the question was, how would I bring live data or sample data actually into? I would imagine you'd want live data from some service somewhere, some data source somewhere, or your data source if you happen to have that in your application. I would just, and how do you do that? How do you bring it into the live tile? I would just reference that, that particular data source object and get into the data. So I just typed a string. Of course, I would act in that. Maybe I want a string, but I would also, for the temperature in this particular scenario, point to the actual object and then the type or whatever. I say it, I can't speak code very well. To get to that actual data. You can totally do it. I have an example where I've done it. I just can't talk to it very well. So
resources for this, like
what's that?
Going back and forth between expression and
going back and working. You're asking about what's it like to work between Expression, Blend, and Visual Studio?
Right. Are there resources for that? Like
actually, you can have. I'll just show you real quickly. I can work with them both simultaneously, so I can edit my, let's actually right-click, edit in Visual Studio, and work simultaneously in Visual Studio and Expression Blend. And as I'm doing that, as I make changes in Blend and save and run my project, if I pop back over to Visual Studio, it's going to say, hey, there have been changes to this project. Do you want to update your project to accept those changes or view those changes? So it'll work seamlessly. It's actually a really good experience from my point of view. Yes?
How you set the data context on your alert details page? Was that just a trick from your navigation?
So I actually did that in the behavior. I can share the behavior that I created with you so you can take a look at it. I did that a while ago. I don't remember the specifics of how I did it, but it's definitely possible. There are many ways to do it. I'm sure there are probably better examples out on the web of how you could do it, but yeah. Sorry. Yes.
It's more kind of a conceptual question. So different from the concept of a beta, a prototype is something that typically you develop and eventually you validate a given concept and then you discard to later on do actual development. But it seems here that you actually consider and suggest using all of this toolset for actual development and not only prototypes. Yeah.
I think you can. The question was, I think if I can summarize, can you use Expression Blend to create full working applications? Yes, I mean, depending on the complexity of the application, depending on how big your team is, depending on whether you need source code control, you need to take those into consideration. It depends. If a very simple example like this, I actually built a full working version. I'm accessing NOAA data and I can't remember the name of the weather service, to pull in live data. I haven't deployed it yet. I did this years ago, just never deployed it. And I created it all in Expression Blend and Visual Studio. Anytime I do code, I do tend to do it in Visual Studio. Of course, debugging, I think you have to do it in Visual Studio. You do have to do it in Visual Studio, so...
I would actually answer it a little bit differently and say Expression Blend is a production quality level tool.
That's a great
answer.
It's
not a prototyping tool. It's a tool you use to do real work, but it also does prototyping really well. So what I was hearing in your question was, oh, is it a prototyping tool, but it can grow up a little bit from that to do something more? And I would say that's the wrong way to think of it. It's an awesome tool. Like when I shipped my app, I had a multi-monitor environment, to your question back there. I always have Blend on one, Visual Studio on the other. I'm going back and forth all the time.
Thank you.
And really prototyping, I think, is, Sketchflow, which we didn't show, is a great way to do prototyping, and there are some great resources out there. You can go watch videos on how to use Sketchflow to prototype a website, a Windows Phone app, and it's a very quick and dirty way to do a throwaway prototype.
And it's sketchy, which is really good. I just want to add on to the Sketchflow discussion topic here. The nice thing about Sketchflow is it's sketchy, so people think they're a little less harsh and they focus maybe more on the interaction as opposed to the positioning of elements and the visual finesse, which is good because you may, and typically in the early phases, you really want to focus on the interaction and work that out. And Sketchflow is really good for that because it is this sketchy appearing interface. So like I said, people they focus on typically what you want them to focus on more readily. I would actually recommend for early prototyping, I do it in phases. Honestly, first thing I do is sketch with pen and paper, always, or whiteboard. Depends on who I'm with. If it's me, I'm doing it on pen and paper. It's always pen and paper. And then I will take it into SketchFlow. If I need to share, it has some nice sharing of your prototype features. You can capture notes and such, you know, with your stakeholders. You could also use it, I've used it for usability testing, for cognitive walkthroughs, if you know what that is. And you can use a more full fidelity prototype as you're getting further along and finessing the user interactions, such as I've just created here. Again, for usability testing, stakeholder feedback, cognitive walkthroughs, heuristic evaluations, all these things to really start finessing your user experience and optimizing it for your users. And as you can see, it's really fast. I mean, granted, I know the tools, but you know, once you get into it, you can become quite proficient with it as well. And it's really powerful, and can help you design really great experiences. Bring that grid in, absolutely. I mean, the grid is essential to creating, I think, great designs. It really does help you. Aligning things, even if things are just slightly askew, affects the overall quality of your application. And if you have something to align to, it just makes it a lot easier and faster to create something that's great. And then pay attention, don't be afraid to go big with fonts, smaller with things that are maybe less important, to really distinguish, you know, and add hierarchy to your user experiences. I mean, seriously, I've seen people, you know, when they're like trying to go play with fonts, I think people are oftentimes afraid to go big. Don't be afraid to go big. And you see in our interfaces in the native applications, text gets cut off, you know. It does, it gets chopped. You know, in Panorama, the Panorama title is chopped until you pan over, right? It actually encourages users to pan, for instance, you know, in Panorama. And it can encourage users to scroll if text gets cut off as well. That can actually add to the usability and help users kind of figure out how to use the interfaces. And I'm kind of rambling, but so thank you.